I'm really passionate about helping people really step into a role of an influencer, step into the role of somebody that's really good at what they do. And, people don't assign you that role. You have to take it.
Podcast Junkies, episode 158. We are just humming along. My name is Harry, last name Duran. I wonder if that would be a good name for a spy. Harry Duran. My podcasting alter ego. Anyway, I digress. How are you? How's everything? Missed you guys. Did you catch last week's episode with Charles Beckwith? That was so awesome. He is such a connector and such a shoot from the hip kind of guy. I really had a smile on my face when I was re-listening to that. And it was interesting because it seems like he has his pulse on technology, back to his hacking ethos or his tech or geek ethos. He mentioned that newsletter, that magazine, 2600. That's seriously like you get hacking credentials if you know what that means. It was really, really good. I hope you enjoyed that conversation. This week, we have the pleasure of speaking with Karen Yankovich. And Karen and I met at MapCon. Shout out to Joe Pardo. So many good friends and connections and past guests have come from that conference. And so Karen and I, we're at a table where I had people talk about their podcast. It was during one of the lunch breaks. And her expertise is in using LinkedIn to get new clients. And she talks at the beginning about why she changed her mind on the importance of her production quality when it came to her podcast. She recounts one of a couple of podcast faux pas she committed. She talks a little bit about her days working in corporate America and how she shifted to working in digital marketing. We reminisce a bit about the East Coast, Northeast Coast. She grew up in New Jersey. And she discusses how some people thought she was crazy for leaving her 6-figure part-time job. We talk about the creative streak that runs through her and how she's always had that. And why, as we mentioned with LinkedIn, she feels it's not only important for corporations, but for entrepreneurs as well, and how it can be useful for podcasters. So this one is really interesting because it's a bit more tactical. We always have fun because that's what we do on this show. There's some tips that you can actually take away, and I'm really interested to what your take is going to be on some of the stuff she's sharing with us. This episode is brought to you by Podcast Movement, newest sponsor for the show. Thank you so much, guys, for supporting this show. I'm really, really happy to have you as a sponsor. You're going to be joining over 2,000 podcasters from around the world in Philadelphia. It's going to be July 24th through the 26th, 3 days of workshops and panels and parties. And yes, I can vouch for the awesomeness of the parties. The conference is going to cover over 100 sessions on topics ranging from the technical aspects, audio production, marketing, monetizing, all sorts of good stuff. It's been so much fun to watch this conference grow from a Kickstarter event to what it is now, going into year 5. I'm going to proudly be wearing my 5-year badge in Philadelphia. So let's ring in the Liberty Bell together. Head on over to podcastmovement.com. Use coupon code PodcastJunkies to receive your discount on the tickets. This episode is also brought to you by Podbean. Did you know that Podbean has a podcast advertising marketplace? It's a free way to earn money through sponsorship on your podcast. They've got great sponsorships opportunities. You're always in control of the ads, so you can accept the ones you like and you can customize where the ads appear, pre, mid, and post. There's a nice form on the Podbean site at sponsorship.podbean.com, and it'll give you an estimate of how much you can earn through sponsorship on your podcast. So you should give that a spin and calculate that and see how much you could possibly earn depending on the traffic you're getting for the show. You can head on over to that link or the main link at podbean.com/podcastjunkies and let them know Harry sent you. Make sure you stay to the end of the episode where we reveal the retention hashtag, but you should just sit back, kick your heels up, and enjoy this fun and entertaining and educating conversation with Karen. So Karen Yankovich, host of Good Girls Get Rich, thank you so much for joining me on Podcast Junkies.
Oh, I'm so excited to be here, Harry. Thanks for having me.
So why don't you tell the story of how we met? Because I think it's always interesting. I always end up telling it, but I think just to mix things up, it's nice to hear other people tell the experience and see if it's any different from what I remember.
Yeah. So I've been a podcast wannabe for years.
Yeah.
And a good friend of mine does a pretty successful podcast. Shell Hamilton does meditation minis.
Yeah.
And a couple of years ago, she mentioned to me about the Mid-Atlantic Podcast Conference. So I was going to go. I think I bought a ticket and everything. And then I just couldn't go at the last minute. And it was like maybe the first year that they did it.
Mm-hmm.
And so I didn't go, but I have been in the group and kind of peripherally kind of watching it all. And, I really 2018, I was determined I was going to get my podcast up and running in this year. And we could talk about all of that. But I saw the Mid-Atlantic podcast came out with a speaker call, and I'm like, all right, well, maybe that'll kick me in the butt to get the podcast done. So I responded to it because I do a lot of talk to podcasters about LinkedIn and social media. So I'm like, well, maybe that would be interesting there. So, they did ask me to come in and do that. So it brought me to the conference, which is how I met you. But it was really interesting because I didn't even have a podcast. I think I had one episode recorded at the time of the conference. So talk about divine timing, because you and everybody else there were so generous with your support and my millions of questions, and really made a huge impact in me getting off of my butt and getting this live. So thank you. But it was really fun it was kind of a little bit weird to be there, like in this room full of people that all know each other from podcasting forever. And then I'm there like, not only am I speaking, but I don't even really have a podcast yet, but it was fun. And everybody was so kind and generous and helpful.
Well, I think it's a matter of, it sounds like there's parts of that where you were getting out of your comfort zone. And we've all been there before. I mean, funny enough, this topic came up because I just interviewed Cliff Ravenscraft, and my regular listeners will know that he's one of the speakers that I saw at NMX in 2014 who inspired me to start Podcast Junkies. And I felt probably what you were feeling at MapCon. I felt that in 2014. I showed up. I wanted to start a podcast about a different topic, and I was just like overwhelmed by all the people there that have been doing it. And I'm like, wow, this is crazy. This is so inspiring. And, fast forward 3.5 years, 150 episodes. So, you'll be there as well. And I think, it's just, sometimes you just got to recognize the phase that you're at in your podcasting journey, and, with other journeys as well. And realize like we've all been there. So it's
yeah. Well, thank you for saying that. It does help. It was fun. And, there was some major takeaways that I think got me out of my comfort zone, but also almost like back into my comfort zone, because it allowed me to I just was putting all these obstacles in my way, that didn't need to be there. So once I met you all and saw the dedication you guys had primarily to the audio quality, which is not something I had really given as the thought that it needed to have towards it. It really changed a lot in my path.
So let's talk a little bit about that, because I love, as my show matures, and it's interesting, when I started out, I said, I'm only going to interview podcasters who've had 50 episodes, because I just want to hear those stories. And then I started speaking to a couple of podcast producers. I had the opportunity to talk to Brendan McDonald, who produces Mark Maron's show. So I was like, well, he's not a podcaster, but he's the producer. And it's Mark Maron's show, so I got to talk to him. And then just people that run networks like Hernan Lopez. And then I realized, I think I was limiting myself, and my idea of what I want the show to be, and this is something for you to keep in mind as well, like what you think the show is when you start could be different than how it matures and how it evolves, because you start realizing there's other ways you can serve your audience. I
love that.
And so, that's something to keep in mind. So let's dig into that a little bit, because I think now I love the fact that I can mix in like the super veterans and then the people who are literally just getting started, because I think listeners are going to be able to relate to different parts of the story. And I know that there's a listener now. I'm speaking to you. I'm talking into your ear directly. You're actually listening to Karen, and you're saying, wait, that's me. And I've been on the fence, and I've been thinking, I've had those same thoughts that Karen is expressing. So let's dive into that a little bit. So talk a bit about why you've had that mind shift in equipment or production quality.
You know why? Well, because my background is social media and marketing, right? So for me, I was looking, the reason I wanted to move to a podcast was more about content. I really wanted a new way to get content out there. I was getting bored with blogging, and I realized there's an importance to consistent content output. So I really wanted to do that. And I had, my social media brain was on. I was like, okay, if I podcast, then I can video them all, and that can be on YouTube, and they can be here, and I can do this. And I had this 95,000 step process laid out, and it wasn't happening because I had too many things going on. And when I was listening to you guys saying, it's all about the audio, I immediately made the decision. I think my poor assistant got more text messages from me during MapCon because I was just I just kept downloading to her, I'll make you understand all of these things later, but I just want to get all this information to you. And I just said, forget video. We're just going to go with audio. And, I do want to incorporate video at some point, but I wasn't really taking into consideration that it wasn't from my listeners' end. I was thinking about it from my end, not my listeners' end. Right. Yeah. So that's the shift that I think I really made was, for me, of course, everything I do is for my audience, right? The content is for my audience, but I think of it from a marketing perspective. And the shift that I made was from their end, what are they going to want from me? And what they're going to want from me, they don't care if I put video or not out. They're going to want to be able to listen to it. They're going to want good audio. They're going to want good content. They're going to want a good user experience, right? So there was, even the guests on my show, there was people talking about the guest experience there. So it really reminded me that, the podcast isn't, who the podcast is really about. And it's about the people listening, not about me and my marketing. So that's the biggest shift I think that made. And that's why I came to that shift. And that to me was stop worrying about the video, stop worrying about a studio and lights and, everything else, and just get a great microphone and start talking into it, and that even took me a while. For those of you that are new, I have 9, I think I just released episode 8. Yes. So I got this microphone, just a simple Audio Technica. It wasn't a ton of money, but I couldn't figure it out. And I was it was with somebody that I met at MapCon, and I was like, I don't know what's wrong. I had no idea that at the bottom of the microphone was the place to plug in the headset jack. So I was like, I don't understand why I can't hear anything, and I literally did 3 episodes with my Apple earbuds, even though I had all the equipment, because I just didn't know what I was doing wrong, and I mean, I'm pretty geeky. I'm pretty techie. I can figure, I just didn't occur to me to look at the bottom of the microphone and to realize there was an input jack there for me to hear so it's just, So those are the kind of crazy things that I did, but now I'm starting to get in the groove, and I'm starting to, do this a little bit more efficiently.
It's funny because every single podcaster, I think I did too, for maybe a couple of days. I was like, I'm going to do video. It's going to be great. It's going to be on YouTube. And then I'm like, who's going to edit this video? I'm not a video editor. And God forbid the first time you have a bump or, a hiccup or something, and you're like, uh-oh, that needs to come out. Audio, over time it gets easier, but video is a whole nother animal. it's like the bandwidth and the processing power it takes to just edit audio, and I tried it a couple of times, and I was like, this is not my genius at all. So
well, that's exactly it. And the audio editing is not my genius either. So thank goodness I found somebody to help me with that. So it would literally just be another expense to me, because I wouldn't be doing it. I'd be paying somebody to do it. And the issue with it is though, and so initially when I first started talking about the podcast, I had an assistant who was just out of college, and really socially savvy. I mean, she was a genius with social media. She graduated with a communications and social media and marketing degree, and did 5 years, got a second degree. So she'd never listened to a podcast. Oh, she's like, I don't even know how to listen to a podcast. So I was like, okay. So that's when I kind of thought they listen to their content on YouTube. But then I really realized that that's not really who my audience is. My audience really isn't the 23-year-old right out of college. I think if they want to listen, there's lots of good information in the show for them. Yeah. But I kind of had to think about that. So that's why I was moving it to YouTube, not for the purposes of anything other than maybe reaching an audience that maybe I wouldn't reach in the podcast player.
So let's talk about who your audience is and why that's important, and how that drives, the content you create week over week.
Yeah. So my audience, in general, are entrepreneurs and small business owners. I do and my expertise, like when people call me in to speak for things, when when you look me up, my expertise, I talk about LinkedIn. That's really what I'm known for, is helping businesses use LinkedIn to get new clients. But LinkedIn isn't in a silo. It's not just LinkedIn. And the reason, by the way, that I lean to LinkedIn is because if you're doing podcasting, you're in the digital marketing world.
Yeah.
You're opening yourself up to somebody wanting to throw your name in a Google search, and your LinkedIn profile is what will come up. So I'm really passionate about helping people really step into a role of an influencer, step into the role of somebody that's really good at what they do. And people don't assign you that role. You have to take it.
Yeah.
You have to kind of walk into it and take it and own it. And then, you have to be able to deliver, but you have to own it. So that's why I love LinkedIn, because that's a place where you can start to do that. But when I thought about doing a podcast, the thought of doing a podcast just about LinkedIn really just kind of bored me. I thought that just didn't really what I want to do, but I wanted to try to stay true to my LinkedIn roots. So I leaned towards, well, what am I doing with LinkedIn? I'm helping people really establish a really confident brand so that they can elevate their income, so that they can use this tool really profitably. And so that's really not talking, I guess, as much about the audience as about the reason for the podcast, but turning that around a little bit. The audience then is the entrepreneurs and small business owners that don't understand how to use some of these social media and marketing and online digital tools to really elevate their brand and elevate their business. So that's who I'm really looking for. It's called Good Girls Get Rich, but it's really not just about women. The reality is women need this often more than men. It's often not the men that I'm going to and saying, you have to tell people how great you are. It's more the women. So, and because I am a woman, I can relate to that more, but it's definitely all of us. It definitely, my audience while it's primarily women, there's a lot of men that are listening, and I'm getting a lot of great feedback from men as well. Hopefully inspiring them to take control of their branding online and to really elevate it to a point that, sorry, my dog has decided to stand next to me and play with the noisiest toy she has.
I was gonna ask you as soon as you were done with that thought, and it's totally fine, and we're gonna leave this in because this is awesome. and regular listeners,
right? Podcast trials and tribulations.
Well, podcast reality, because I could tell I could tell that you were trying to get your thought finished. As one hand was, I could see that one hand was down. Like, it's so funny because everyone knows.
Like, to find the noisiest toy. So now my podcast rules are: turn off your cell phone, turn off your house phone, hide all the noisy dog toys.
And regular listeners will know that Disco is always barking every once in a while, so that if the mailman comes or something like that, so they hear that. And I think it's funny because it's real life. Like, I mean, and this is the things as podcasters, like. And that's why my listeners like the fact that I just leave it in, because it's like, oh, okay, Harry's not trying to be perfect. And then sometimes I overdo it. I love telling the story of the UPS guy rang, and I was like, shit, the UPS guy, man. And I got up, I went over there, and I was like dealing with that, and my guest was on the phone. He's like, oh, let me make a call while Harry does that. Well, I left that whole part in there. And a super fan like Patrick Keller, and I think someone else, they're like, Harry, did you mean to leave that in there? And I was like, it was just like, I was having like and that's why I don't do my editing anymore, because I was like, okay, that's the last straw. Like, I am not, because I was just, I kind of paused, I think, while I was going to do that, and I missed taking it out. So, but that stuff happens. Like, we're not NPR.
Right. Exactly.
And this is the show, where we can kind of like commiserate with that sort of stuff. This, granted, for your show, you'd probably like edit that out and stuff. If you were having,
what, maybe not. I actually, my fourth show, I was interviewing Marsha Shander, who I adore, and she's sharing all this genius. And the next morning I was leaving for Portland, and my iPhone was dead, and my new iPhone was being delivered, and Verizon Wireless requires a signature.
Oh, yeah.
So I couldn't miss the UPS guy. So same thing. So I knew I had to take it. So I thought I hit mute as I'm walking, and I'm letting her talk. And I'm just letting her talk while I'm walking around with my iPad and hit mute. And of course I didn't hit mute. And there's all this noise and all this this background noise. So I had to leave it in because her stuff was great.
Yeah.
So I just put something in the intro saying, explaining that exact story, explaining like, well, I thought I hit mute, but what you're hearing at minute whatever is me answering the UPS guy because I couldn't miss him.
Are you using call recorder with Skype?
I'm not. I'm using Zoom.
Okay, using Zoom.
I'm using Zoom right now just because it's easiest and I needed to do what was easy.
But Zoom now allows you to record both sides of the conversation.
Well, I didn't know that it ever didn't.
Yeah, so I think you could have it's more editing work, but if you had to, you could always like cut out your part when you do the edit and then just leave her part in there. So
yeah. So you're saying Zoom, I could set it up so that it's recording it separately, two separate
there's
files.
There's an option.
I didn't realize that.
Yeah, afterwards we could do a screen share or something, but afterwards you'll see that it has in the record section, in the preferences, recording, and there's options record both sides of the conversation.
Oh, really? I will. Oh, that's a great idea. I'm going to do that. That's good to know. That's really good to know. Another thing that kind of the universe coming together, like the universe came together and threw me at MapCon right when I needed to be there. Mm-hmm. And also one of my clients was working with an assistant, and it really wasn't working the way she wanted. And she's like, really what her strength is podcast editing. And I was like, really? Can I get an intro? So I, kind of tripped over just an amazing audio editor. I call her my producer because she does, she's just been really, really good. And, we're still getting the flow down, but, I'm torturing her a little bit with too many last minute recordings, but I'm trying to get on top of that. So
very good. So how far ahead do you plan your episodes?
So, I created a Google sheet, and so my episodes, I'm doing every other episode is an interview. So I have a solo show and an interview. So my interviews are scheduled, and they're not all recorded, but they're at least scheduled out almost through the end of March.
Nice. That's a lot.
It is, right? But remember, I only need 2 a month, right? So I've got them scheduled and I've got them recorded, I think, through the end of, for the next 3. I think I have the next 2 or 3 recorded. But the solo shows are a killer because I want them to be valuable.
Yeah.
And I, and I've got I have a template that I kind of laid out because I have a template that I use for webinars, right? So I'm kind of using the same template for the solo shows because I want them to be kind of content driven. Yeah. So there's a topic and I want them to have 3 takeaways and I want to incorporate some kind of a story into it. So I literally have not gotten the final, not even the not final. I haven't gotten the first draft of the audio file for the episode that's releasing in 4 days yet. But yesterday I spent some time with I have a virtual assistant that works with my business in general. And we spent a couple hours yesterday mapping out shows. So I've got 4 more shows mapped out. She's doing some research around it to get me some statistics and stuff on it. And then I've got next Friday on my calendar to record those 4 shows. Okay. So I'm hoping to get a better jump on it because I feel like it's I'm responsible for making sure that these people that my team isn't scrambling to try to get things done on time, right? I've got to get my part in, but I also want to make sure the episodes are good. So the solo shows are much more stressful for me to record than the interview shows. And hopefully with this new process that we just put in place, I'll get a better jump on them. But I don't want to be too far ahead. I'd like to kind of be a month ahead. I want to be relevant, right? So I don't want to be too far ahead. But yeah, so right now I'm about on the solo. I've got probably the 2 or 3 weeks, 3 more guest episodes recorded, and then I've got some scheduled for January that are going to take me out beyond that. But the solo shows, I don't even have another one. That's it. The one that's releasing next week is recorded, and I don't have another one recorded yet. So
it'll come. I've
got to get it. Yeah.
One thing you want to be careful with that mic is if you touch it a lot, it makes more noise that's captured.
Oh, really? Yeah. Well, you know what it is? I have this boom arm with it, and it doesn't stay down. If I let go of it, it just rises up. So I got to hold it down so the microphone stays where I want it to be.
The joys of podcasting.
It just like mysteriously rises.
You're going to have to be standing soon then.
I know. Let me add that to my list of things to buy.
Talk a little bit how you got to your business and, were you in corporate America before and you transitioned over?
Yeah, I was in corporate America. I was in IT sales. I did wide area data networks. I owned a small consulting company in New Jersey, and we did, sold phone systems and did data network design and voice network design and agents for Verizon. And that's where my background was. And we closed that company a while back, and I just did consulting out of my house, just privately. And one of my customers hired me part-time, and that led to full-time. And that's really attractive and at the time my kids were young. So, that's attractive when you've got benefits you have to worry about benefits and keeping, the roof over everybody's head. It was nice to have a regular paycheck. And I kept a couple of consulting clients, but I had one gigantic client that lasted like 3 years. And when that client ended, I just didn't want to get back into it. Like I just was done with it. But yet I really didn't want to stay where I was in the corporate, the part-time job that I had either. So I started just messing around. I took some classes in online marketing and started to market some classes for a friend of mine who was doing some workshops, and started doing some some stuff for my business. And really, it kind of turned out to be my sweet spot. And people started literally coming to me and saying, how did you do this? Can you do it for me? And I still remember the first person that threw a check at me and said, just do it for me. And eventually when people start throwing money at you, you start thinking, well, maybe I should shift my business, right? So I have since shifted my business 100% to digital marketing. I've not been at that corporate job that I was, part-time job that I was at. I left that about 3 years ago. And I've been doing this 100% full-time since then. And I love it because it blends, even though I always did IT and techie stuff, I was always on the sales piece. Okay. So I was always in the sales and marketing piece of it. My dog is still running around like crazy. She has been sleeping.
What's your dog's name?
Day. Sadie.
Sadie. What kind of dog is it?
A toy, and a Havanese. Havanese, yeah. She's like about the size of a Shih Tzu. She's like 11 pounds.
You want to pick her up and show?
Sure.
Not that you guys listening can actually see what I'm seeing, but oh, she's so cute.
You noisy little thing, you.
Send me take a photo. We'll put it in the show notes. We'll put it in the show notes.
I will. Totally.
So
anyway,
yeah. So
I left there, and I've been doing that full time ever since.
Was that scary?
Oh my gosh, it was crazy scary. It was, I had a business coach, and I was, prepared to do this. Really what happened though, Harry, was I was getting, as my business grew pretty fast, and I was getting all these invitations to speak at places. So I was using all my vacation days and sick days, and they didn't care at all. They knew I was doing this, but I was using all my time. I was out of sick days like 6 months into the year and taking unpaid days. Yeah. And that's when I said, I really have to make a choice. I got to the point where I had to make a choice. Did I want to start giving up opportunities to speak all over the world, or did I want to commute an hour and a half each day to work every day? So I just did it, and I gave them like 60 days notice. And I had this long thing, and I had this vision of getting up in the morning and, having beautiful breakfasts and doing yoga. And I'm barely showered by 8:00 at night sometimes, like you get up in the morning, you turn your computer on and you start working. Right.
Yeah,
so
totally.
The vision that I had didn't exactly come to be, but it was, I did a lot of prep work for it, but I still wasn't prepared. There was still a lot of, a lot of things that I had to do that I wasn't prepared for.
Well, I think people who are moving into this, and I've been doing it full time for 2 years now. We don't know what we don't know. And I think, I think what's important is to surround ourselves with like-minded folks, because I'm sure you can relate. When I made the shift, I was in corporate America for 20 plus years, and I talk about it a lot in the talks that I give. Like, I thought entrepreneurialism was, I don't know if that's the proper word, but just like that was like the lemonade stand person, or the person who's, I just couldn't relate to what an entrepreneur
and
does.
Lots of people can't relate, right? Lots of people in my life still can't relate. Like, what do you do?
Yeah.
So
then now I can't relate to corporate America anymore. Like the idea of and thankfully the last couple of years I was working from home anyway, so it was a nice transition, because I didn't go straight from cubicle to home office, because that would have been a bit jarring, I'm sure. I was in IT consulting, and I had a business where I would travel to clients, so sometimes I would be there, and then the other times I would be working from home. So. But it's interesting it's important to surround yourself, and I'm wondering if that's been helpful for you to surround yourself with like-minded folks, and I know attending the conferences helps a lot too.
it's critical,
Yeah.
because the people in my life who I love and they love me, they don't understand it. Like you go to like for example, going to MapCon, right? They didn't pay me to speak. I paid for my hotel room. I paid to, I live near there, so I didn't have to pay to get there. But I met so many people, and I know how valuable that's going to be to my business. But there are people in my life that will say, great, did you make a lot of money? You know what I mean? Like they don't understand it. So having, and then that might make you second guess yourself. Why am I doing this? What am I doing? So having people in your life that are in a similar path is critical, because unless you have an entrepreneurial family and entrepreneurial friends, there's going to be a lot of people in your life that don't understand. My dad still is mad at me, I think, for leaving my job. He doesn't understand it. And he was so angry, like not yelling in anger, but I could tell he was so angry with me because he didn't understand it, and he had us to deal with it, right? It is what it is, but it's so having the people in your life, surrounding yourself with like-minded people, especially people that help you think bigger.
Yeah.
Right. Because as an entrepreneur, if you have a corporate job and you're making six figures, that sounds like a lot of money. But if you're an entrepreneur and you're making six figures, you might as well work at McDonald's. You'll have more money in your pocket, right? Because by the time you pay for your equipment and your benefits and your healthcare and your CRM systems and everything else, that's not as much money. So as an entrepreneur, and I see this a lot where people are like, I'm looking to have a 6-figure year. I'm like, I hope that's enough. I hope that's enough. And I don't mean that to be flip. It's just, I don't want you to get frustrated and lose hope, because you need to think bigger. You need to think about if I want 6 figures in my pocket, like I had when I had that corporate job, as an entrepreneur, I got to be looking at double that maybe.
I'm so glad you said that, because it's the reality. I mean, like you said, 6 figures barely keeps the lights on. It keeps everything working. It keeps you functioning. Keeps the people that are supporting you paid. So it's good. You can run a business, but you can't live on that, and you can't, and you have to think bigger. I always think of 10x. How do I 10x this? If my business was to 10x, what would break? That's just a nice metric that just helps me think big. And like you said, being around people where you can share those, and they're like, "Oh, that's not a crazy thought. Or people that are doing it even better." You're like, "Oh, okay, that's aspirational."
Yeah, it's true. And, I am one of the things that I'm always a big fan of is being in a mastermind, whether it's paid or free or whatever. And I'm in a mastermind. And because we're recording this, it's early December. We're talking a lot about our 2018 goals. Yeah. And, they threw a number at me that I haven't figured out how I'm going to meet yet. Like, no matter what I do with my products and services, I can't meet that number yet. And that's a good problem to have, because it's making me think bigger. Like, what else do I have to do to meet that number? Like, what do I have to do to make that number? So, my family and friends can't do that. You've got to surround yourself with people that are going to, help you really, because I love what I'm doing and I want to keep doing it. So you've got to do the business piece of it as well. And the only way to do that is to have other people in your life that can support you with that.
Yeah, it's very inspirational, not to harp on that point, but just for the listener, just to find that person, that group of people, that mastermind that push you to think way beyond what you would think you're capable of if it was just you. And because they push you to just think out of the box. And sometimes the out of the box ideas, Cliff was talking about this as well when we were speaking this week. Like, he wrote his goals down. He has a 4-step process. I think it's like, have the goal, you got to believe in the goal. You got to write it down. You got to share it with people, and just like all the things you need to do, because a lot of people just have a goal in their mind and they wonder why they don't make it, because you haven't shared it, because you haven't told people to hold you accountable to it.
Right. And then, you can write the goal you want, but have you done the work to see how it's going to, like I said, I can't figure out how I'm going to meet this number they threw at me yet, which means I've got to figure I've got to do some work around that. And that's good things for a business to do, know?
I just had a thought, because I'm always looking to evolve and grow the show. I could add a segment where I check in with past guests in like 6 months, or like, hey, you mentioned this, and I just like, how did you do
so there's my accountability, huh? Is that what I'm hearing? I got to come back to be accountable to you too. I'm going to hold you to holding me to that, because I want to be held to it. So.
Okay, I'm going to write this. This is the first time ever on Podcast Junkies live accountability call, but 6 months, does that make sense?
That works. That works.
So 6 months, you listeners are hearing it here first. In 6 months, I'll have a "Where Are They Now" segment.
I love it.
And the first
I love
one,
it.
and the first one that's going to be on is we're going to have a 5-minute conversation with Karen and see where she is.
Awesome. Fabulous. I love it. I love it. All right. And that's going to make me that's going to hold me
Wow.
accountable too, because now I'm going to remember that. I'm going to write it down and put it on I'm going to put your picture on my wall somewhere
That's good.
so that I look and Harry when I'm like slacking.
6 months, 5 months, 4 months, 3 months, 2
Right.
months. So what was life growing up? Did you grow up in New Jersey?
Did grow up in New Jersey. Like I grew up in like a Mayberry kind of life, you know?
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, I lived in a little town in New Jersey, and my dad was a basketball coach. He was a teacher, but he also was a basketball coach, college basketball as well. So that was fun. We had a lot of, which is me and my sister, so we didn't have any boys, but we definitely did a lot around sports and basketball in our house. And it was fun to grow up going to all the college basketball games. And, but yeah, just a traditional, everybody in my family is a teacher kind of family in life. And that's what I went to school for. And then I remember distinctly coming home from college in the summer and working at a daycare. And I don't know what I was making at the time, but the teachers that had their degree were making like $2 an hour more than me. And I was like, as much as I love doing this, I can do this for fun on Saturdays, but I kind of like the idea of making money as well. So I didn't ever really go into teaching. I've always kind of just been in business in some way, shape, or form.
Yeah, it's very challenging, and it's one of the most underappreciated professions and one of the most important professions when you think about like the interactions that teachers have with molding the minds of our future generations and how we treat them and how we pay them. It's just like, I'm sure that's a topic there's probably a podcast just about that topic.
Should be if there's not. There should be if there's not, because you're right. It is so important. And, I will say, it is, at least here in New Jersey, they've got nice retirement packages and they've got, and a lot of us don't have that. So, but they worked for that. They worked hard for that, and they made less money than a lot of us made to get that retirement package that they've got now. So, it's interesting. Yeah.
So who from your, I'm curious about, I know you mentioned the reaction from your father, but what about other friends, other family who is surprised about where you are and where you've ended up right now?
You know what? So I had this job that was basically part-time. I had 4 weeks paid vacation, 2 weeks paid sick days, and I was making 6 figures. And for this basically part-time job, and I left it to do. And I had about 10 people say, "Can I get that job? Like, how can I get that job? Can you just give it to me?" So many people thought I was crazy. Although I will tell you, there's a few people that I could think about that were saying to me while I was there, "Why are you still there? Like, why are you still there?" So there's people in my life that, that got me better than others, I guess.
What was it about that, where you were or what you were like putting out, that they were asking you, or that question about why you're still there?
Because they knew that I loved being, entrepreneurial, and that I was just in this, and it was great. It was fine, but it was, it was just kind of like a doing a lot of reports and just stuff I didn't like. I wasn't doing sales. I wasn't meeting with people. I had a crazy long commute, which was physically taking its toll on me. So that was terrible. And then, so most of the, most people didn't really understand that. And most people still don't understand it. Yeah. Most people still don't understand it. They still don't understand, what I do, and they don't really need to, right? They don't really need to, but it just wasn't me. And I just wasn't really, not that I wasn't happy there. I wasn't loving what I was doing. I couldn't even imagine myself there for 10 years. The people there were really nice. The job was great, but I wasn't really being challenged. I wasn't really using my brain at all. I wasn't being creative at all. In fact, a kind of a funny story, there was one part of my job where I had to do these reports, and it was a terrible part of my job. It was like this funding thing that you had to do all this crazy ass calc. It was awful. And then the staff that worked at the company that provided the funding was, there was like a rotating door there. There was new people all the time. They were poorly undertrained. Their systems never worked. It was awful. And after I left there, after I left the company and I wasn't doing that job anymore, I took on a new coaching client, and I didn't really know what her full-time job was, but it turns out she worked at that company. So my phone rings one day and I see that on my caller ID. I was like, "Oh my God, how'd they find me? What do they want from me? Like, I can't even," I was like, and then she answered the phone, and then I had to say to her, I said, "I have to tell you, if you think I was acting kind of weird when I first answered the phone and I told her like the story, I was like, I had no idea that's where you worked. And she's like, now you know why I need to get out of here, and I need to get more money doing this. And I'm like, I'm right there with you. I'll help you. But it was like really like my stomach sunk. I was like, how did they find me? What do they want from me now? Just so crazy. But it wasn't, listen, and it was, there are people that are very comfortable with that wanted the security, and I gave away the security. I gave up a lot of security for that. Not everybody could do that, but just like a lot of people can't give up the security, I couldn't give up the creativity. So yeah.
Is that creative streak been consistent for you throughout your life?
Creative in the way that, I'm not creative in an artsy kind of way. It's more my brain is always going, and I'm always, I like strategy. I like, that's just the brain that I have. I have a really kind of strategic brain. So I just like to, I'm always kind of thinking about the next couple steps down the road, so I'd find myself like unasked helping people with their businesses. And, eventually like I had to get to the point where I got to a place where people were wanting my input as opposed to me like shoving it to people. Yeah. But, I was the kid that was always planning all the carnivals in the summer, and I was always like the organizer. So it made sense for me to own my own business and not work for somebody else.
Tell me about one of the carnivals you planned.
Oh my gosh. So when I was a kid, I'm going to date myself a little bit here. There was a lot of people doing carnivals for muscular dystrophy, and you would get this little kit from the muscular. Remember, they had the I don't know if they still have it. The Raise Money-a-thon, and Jerry Lewis was in charge of it.
Telethon,
right?
Yeah.
So the Jerry Lewis was in charge of it even way back when, and you would get this little kit from them to do a carnival, and then you would send them all the proceeds from the carnival. So I'd gather up all the neighborhood kids, and somebody would be I was always the psychic. I liked being the girl with the crystal ball. But we'd have games, and we'd have like all these different things. And the rest of the neighborhood would come. We'd make all our parents come and give us money, and we'd make like $8 and then mail it to muscular dystrophy. And then we would watch for our names to scroll across the bottom on the telephone.
Yeah, that's right.
$8. Yeah.
Did you wear the turban when you did the psychic reading?
I don't think I had a turban. I definitely don't think I had a turban. I don't actually know what I had, but I didn't have a turban.
I think of that. What was that machine in Big, where they go to the Coney Island?
Yeah, that's where I was. That's what it was. I grew up in New Jersey, so near Coney Island, all the boardwalks, so psychics on the boardwalk and stuff. So
that was your inspiration. So can you talk a little bit about the importance of maybe like a mentor or someone who's been helpful for you along the way?
Yeah. So one of the big motivators for me in 2011, I think, I took Marie Forleo's B School program.
Okay. Yeah.
And at the time, it was nowhere near as big and as huge as it is now. And it was really my first foray into watching people that were really successful. And what I liked about it was I knew that every single person in that group paid $2,000 to be there. And I knew that. So I felt like, to me, that put me in a group of people that were motivated and dedicated, as opposed to, it was a $29 program and everybody, like easy to put your money in. I knew everybody there was there. And I was watching people that were making tons and tons of money doing this and really serving, not just like there's people that were in B School at the time. Amy Porterfield was in B School, Danielle Laporte, Denise Duffield Thomas. These are all people that were in B School. And that's actually where I met Jess Kupferman, where I did this. She was in there. So there was these people that had these, really serving the world businesses, making a ton of money doing it. And it really made me think bigger. That's where I learned to think beyond the 6-figure goal and to think about how to serve and not just do that. So Marie's really been a mentor to me over the years because, and what I love about her too is she is really focused. She does one thing a year and she does it really well. I believe she has 2 programs now. She has the Copy Cure as well as B School now, but she does it really well. She taught me how to find your sweet spot and then dive in and do it really well. And that's, that to me was really important. And that's what that was the first of my digital mentors online. But, I'm a fan of, I I know what I'm good at, and what I'm good at is strategy. I like to help people. I like to talk, right? So I like to blend all of those things. I like to bring people in for things like my podcast editing and things like that, and be able to do that. And like, for example, for this year, one of my goals for 2018 is I just have to get a little bit more organized. I'm really, really organized in my life, but I just need to get organized with my time. Yeah. So Michael Hyatt is my is my shining star for 2018. I bought his full focus planner. I want to do his best year ever program, and so I kind of rotate through people as I feel like I have a need, like where I find the biggest need is to achieve whatever I need to achieve in the upcoming year. Like I try to find new people. So again, I haven't gotten in there with him yet, but that's who I'm kind of focusing on moving forward. And as I've gone through the years with my business, different people have kind of come in and out that I've kind of really learned from, because I'm always going to learn. I was not born knowing how to do all this stuff, so I want to learn from the people that do it really well. I don't,
that's
to important. Me, that's the best way for me to learn.
And what I love about that is a lot of times, when I've asked this question in the past and people talk to someone that specifically was in their lives that they know personally, but I love that you're sharing someone who's inspired you so much that she's given you the guidance, and she may not even know that, how important she's been in your life. And I think there's different flavors. Like, who do you admire, and who's like you said, your shining star. And I love that you change the focus as the needs in your business change too. That's really important.
Yeah. Well, and I think you need to do that, right? I think you need to do that. I think you need to always be shifting I've even with business coaches, I had a business coach that I adored for years, but sometimes it's just time to move on, to somebody else, and shift into whatever is going to best support you next moving forward, honoring it, right? Honor it and move on to what the next step is for you.
So let's talk a little bit about LinkedIn, because I think it's one of those platforms. It's interesting because the thoughts about LinkedIn when you're in corporate and the thoughts about LinkedIn when you're an entrepreneur are very different. Yeah. And it's what's so funny is I remember in corporate life, you would know when someone lost their job because they would start refreshing their LinkedIn. And
yes. So that's a challenge. That's really a challenge for me when I do corporate training, because they're like, why on earth would I want to help my people have better LinkedIn profiles so they can get better jobs? Yeah. So I really have to, it's a lot of mindset shifts work that I have to do with them. Like, first of all, if your people are leaving their job because you help them all with their LinkedIn profile, then you have a bigger problem than LinkedIn.
Exactly.
But bigger than that, if I'm saying that your personal brand gets elevated when you have a really strong LinkedIn profile. Imagine if as a corporation, all of your employees have a strong LinkedIn profile. Mm-hmm. That elevates your business brand, right? So I'm a big proponent of corporations really diving in and helping their employees have a strong personal brand, make relationships with the people they're doing business with and dealing with. I think that's really important for corporations. But from an entrepreneur perspective, it's invaluable. It's where the relationships, can get furthered. I mean, and Harry, that actually was how we ended up talking here today, right? Yeah. We connected on LinkedIn. We started to have a little LinkedIn chat. It was Thanksgiving. I was driving and I was listening to your interview with John Lee Dumas. Yeah. And I literally, when I stopped to get gas, I texted you on LinkedIn. I jumped onto that conversation. I'm like listening to your interview. It's awesome. So it's how so I went to MapCom and I left there and I connected with people that I met there and to further the relationships, use LinkedIn to further the relationships. We could use Facebook to do that, but it is a little,
it's different.
It's a little different. It's not, sometimes it's not, sometimes it's a little overstepping, you're not really ready to be Facebook friends yet. Right? So, and you don't know who those people are going to be that are going to be your Facebook friends out of it. So by using LinkedIn, you can use it to further relationships that to further your business.
And what I've been doing recently, and I've been more open to receiving invitations, but what I do is I message folks and say, hey, thanks for reaching out and connecting. Can I ask you what prompted you to hit the connect button? I'm always trying to make sure relationships here are adding value. So I have a little help with my VA for some of that as well. But, if you're just getting started, that's a nice conversation starter. And I've had great conversations and even some business that have come out of those introductions.
Absolutely. And the most important piece of what you just said is the conversation starter. Yeah. There's so many different ways you can start a conversation, but starting a conversation is really the important part without having an intention as to what the end game is going to be with the conversation, right? Just starting a conversation. You never know if you may have a conversation with somebody who says, you need to meet my brother Joe. He's going to, he really needs help from somebody like you. And maybe you're going to get a warm intro to the biggest client you ever had, right?
Exactly.
So you have to go into these conversations with a really open mind about where they're going to end up.
And I would like to ask people, like, what's your business and who do you serve? Because, that you want to get it out of them in their own words, because then they may articulate it in a way that's different than what they have on their profile. And some people don't even put it on their profile.
I know. Tell me about it.
So have you seen any use of it that's specifically of help or benefit for podcasting? Absolutely. So, for example, if you're listening to podcasts and you love the podcast, jump on LinkedIn, connect with the podcast host, tell them how much you love the podcast, write them a recommendation, right? I listened to your podcast. It was awesome, blah, 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 blah. And do it strategically, man. Like, what if you want to get on their show? Like, I don't really, for a while I was doing a lot of work with realtors. So I was listening to some realtor podcasts, connecting with the hosts in hope that they were going to have me on their show so I could offer, my free ebook that helps realtors with social media, right? So but I did it in a way where I was being of service to them first. You got to give first.
Being of service to them first, and really, and genuinely, listen to the podcast. Don't just say, "Ooh, he's got a podcast." Listen to the podcast. Make sure they actually have guests. Make sure that you'd actually be a good fit for their guests. And then if you think there is, then it's a great way to do that. But beyond that, and it isn't always just about being a guest on the shows. It's really about, if you're a podcaster, right? Using LinkedIn to say that you're a podcaster. I actually haven't gone into my LinkedIn profile yet and updated it with all the podcast stuff. The podcast headers in there as of this morning, but I have to go in and update LinkedIn. And I did it at one point, but I pulled it out because I'm always changing mine depending on who I'm training at any given time. But I did a training at one point for Jess Kufferman has Podcasting School for Women, and I did a LinkedIn training for them. Okay. So I went in and added a whole podcaster thing, even though I only had a YouTube channel at the time that was planning to be a podcast and never was. So you definitely can create an experience of podcast host. And then people look at that differently. Yeah, totally. People look at you as the host. They look at you with influence as opposed to, that guy that has a microphone. I don't really know what he does, but now you have a show, right? Yeah. So it's valuable.
Well, yeah, it's really important. And one of the things we do with clients is when they get to a certain point, probably typically around the 3-month mark, I'm like, go to LinkedIn and add podcast host, because you are a podcast host now, and put that in your profile. So I think it's really important to be strategic about the types of relationships. And the other thing we do is we post clients' episodes on LinkedIn now too. So it's just another way to introduce people to what you're doing, because sometimes you have these old profiles that started years ago when you're doing something else, and now you're introducing it to a whole new audience. And I think you just never know, like, when someone might see it. Yeah.
And really, it's a top of mind campaign as well, right? You want to stay top of mind. So if you're posting your episodes in there, it gives people an opportunity to watch them and listen to them, and
very good.
Really good stuff. Really good stuff.
So a couple questions as we get into the home stretch here. What's something you've changed your mind about recently?
Oh, something I've changed my mind about recently. You know what? I mean, like I said to you, going into 2018, what I've changed my mind about is working as many hours as I've worked. I'm really determined to focus more on my family and my friends and me moving forward, and putting a little bit less hours into my business. And it isn't about working harder; it's working smarter, I think. So that's really the biggest thing that I've changed my mind about. With some exceptions, 6 o'clock, I'm done working. That's a huge change from how I've been in the past. Believe me.
What's the one most misunderstood thing about you?
Oh, you know what? I'm confident in a lot of areas in my life, but that doesn't mean I don't need your help. So feel free to still offer to help, even though I can do things by myself all the time. Doesn't mean I need to do them all by myself all the time. So I'm more than willing to take your help if somebody'd like to offer some.
What's been the best way, or the best approach that's worked, where you feel like the person is genuine about their interest in trying to help you out, and not like doing it in a condescending way?
You know what? Just exactly kind of things we talked about here today. And that goes for personal and business. Just do it. Just help. Yeah. Just be of service, and it comes back around to you. Don't keep track. Please don't keep track. Don't say it's your turn to help me. When I tell Mike I have 4 kids, I tell them it will all be even when I die. Let's not keep track in the middle. Do you know what I mean? We don't have to keep track now.
I love that.
Just continue to be of service to people, and continue to support the people in your life, and they'll support you.
Well, that's a beautiful bow to this conversation. So what's the best place for folks to track you down?
Well, goodgirlsgetrich.com is my
Yes.
podcast. I would love for you to listen to that. I'm at Karen Yankovich across all social media. KarenYankovich.com is my main website. Easiest place to get me is just go to my website. Everything's linked there.
Very cool. Well, thank you so much, Karen. This has been an incredibly fun, wide-ranging conversation, and I love that I never know where they're going to go. And
this was fun. This was great. Right.
Thanks for sharing your time and your wisdom.
Thanks so much, Harry.
Thank you so much, Karen, for sharing that wealth of information and for coming on this show. It's really interesting to get your take on platforms that a lot of podcasters may not be spending a lot of time on, such as LinkedIn. So I appreciate the fact that we met and that you were able to share that. As always, full show notes are available. Head on over to podcastjunkies.com/158 to see all the links we mentioned, summaries, timestamps, tweetable quotes. So much good, rich information is created on the show notes page, and we put a lot of work into it. So please check that out. If there's anything that caught your fancy during the conversation, I guarantee it'll be on that page. Intro and outro music composed by Cedar and Soil. Check them out at cedarsoil.com. As always, don't forget to support our episode sponsors, Podbean at podbean.com/podcastjunkies, and Podcast Movement. Use coupon code podcastjunkies for your discount July 23rd through the 25th in Philadelphia. Tune in next week for my conversation with Mary Nichols following the MapCon Love, aka DJ Fusion, host of Fusebox Radio, and a podcaster for a heck of a long time, quite possibly the longest running podcast/broadcaster that's been on the show. If you can believe that or not, you won't believe at what year she started in radio and then subsequently in podcasting. This is a fantastic story, and I can't wait for you to hear more from Mary. If you made it this far, the retention hashtag that you are looking for can be found here. It's going to be LinkedIn Karen, hashtag LinkedIn Karen, and you can tag Karen at Karen Yankovich. That's KarenYankovich, and us at podcast_junkies. Don't forget to sign up if you're new to the show, podcastjunkies.com/8tools. You get the free PDF of all the 8 tools I've used to launch Podcast Junkies. And don't forget, we're always looking for comments, podcastjunkies.com/speakpipe. Thank you, City of Los Angeles Police Department, for that siren, and podcastjunkies.com/iTunes to leave us the review you've been meaning to do. And now I'm going to guilt you into doing it now. See you guys. Talk to you next week.